marketing. We are now on module 4. Unless we forget, module 3 was pretty good. It talked about branding. We talked about name selection. I gave you the crazy background on some of the names that I selected, how you came up with your names. I sure hope we gave our listeners and our viewers lots to think about. And now, a favorite topic of both of ours, which is marketing. Marketing. Marty, tell us what you think about marketing.
So, Joel, branding and marketing are two intersecting circles. To me, they're hand in hand. And I think this module is probably going to be certainly one of the most valuable modules we can give to our listeners. And it starts by identifying, your audience. First and foremost, are we talking about a B2B? Are we talking about B2C? And what we mean by that is this business to business, or is this business to consumer? Because obviously they're significantly different markets. And even drilling down a little bit further, we have to really talk about the potential of segmenting your business for more targeted marketing. As an example, if you're selling a food product, you don't want to just, market the food product. What you really want to think about is marketing that food product to specific segments, so that you can target market those segments. As an example, you may want to sell your food product to a consumer, and then decide, gee, this is going really well. Why don't I sell it to restaurants? And then decide, hey, it's really going well. Why don't I sell it to catering companies, maybe supermarkets, and so on and so forth. So obviously, you're going to market differently to the consumer as you will to the supermarket, if you're trying to get the supermarkets to carry your product. The other thing that I think is really important, Joel, to look at are things that we term in the business as verticals. In other words, what are the other markets? If you were selling, as an example, let's say a hair product, and you decide you're going to sell this through hair salons, and you start out and you've got all these beauty salons, everybody's carrying your product, then you realize, wow, this product's really amazing. There's a whole bunch of salons picking up. Maybe I should be marketing this through retail stores. Maybe I should be marketing this through beauty supply stores. So there's a bunch of other verticals that you can look at in terms of both target marketing as well as other verticals. And you really have to look at your business and say, are there other markets that I can take my product to where I can sell it? You might have a product that you're selling to the pharmaceutical industry that has impact on some other healthcare industry or something even non-healthcare related. So you have to look at the vertical markets that your product may have some application to, that maybe today you're not even thinking about, but going through the process of marketing your products, you decide, hey, this would be really good, selling somewhere else as well. And the other thing that I think is really important when it comes to marketing and looking at, targeting your audiences, there are many different associations and organizations out there that already have a large number or a large number of members, or a large number of people within their database. They already have the audience. They've already targeted that audience. Sometimes it's not worth reinventing the circle, Joel. I think sometimes you have to look and say, hey, if I'm trying to target the healthcare industry or the footwear industry or whatever it is, the first thing to look at is to see if there are other partners out there that are potentially targeting maybe the same audience that you want to get to. And you might decide to partner with them and say, or at least try to obtain a list from them. And rather than reinvent the cycle, realizing that somebody else already has that information. And I'm not just talking about mailing list companies, because that's another source. Although we can have a long discussion about mailing list companies, I think they have an over-exaggerated value at times, because I think often that the lists are not always kept right up to date. Often you can only use them once. So there's some advantages to going to mailing list companies, but certainly finding a partner that's already done that, siphon through everything and has a current list could be a really good option for you as well.
And sometimes, Marty, it's kind of like you take a look and you say, let's say, for example, in security, let's say bank security, for example.
Right.
The obvious thing, if you were selling security to banks, the obvious thing you would think, well, I'm going to get in touch with the bank. I'm going to get in touch with the security manager and work from there. Well, that is an obvious. But sometimes if you put a lot of brain power into it, you say, just a second, my product is going to prevent robberies in banks. Well, what would happen? Who else would be interested in seeing that bank robberies are reduced? Well, why don't I go to the police? If I go to the police and I show them my product, they may help me introduce my product to the banks at potentially a higher level. So it's kind of thinking outside the box instead of sometimes the obvious. The same thing. Let's say you're selling, everybody knows about card access control for commercial establishments, for any type of establishment that you want to restrict entry. So the obvious thing, well, why don't I call up the company, find out who handles security, and sell them access control system? But there's another way of doing it. What about architects? Architects design buildings for companies that are going to move in. And if I get them to spec my technology, then I've got a better chance of getting it into that location. So it's kind of thinking narrow, but also widening your scope beyond the traditional method of marketing.
And talking about traditional methods of marketing, Joel, in today's world, obviously everybody, the first thing that'll come to mind is digital marketing. And I think, there's the obvious vehicles like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Google, and LinkedIn. You can go to LinkedIn and use one of their products called Sales Navigator. There's a whole variety of different ways of doing digital marketing. But I would be at this point, and I think you might agree, it'd be interesting to hear your opinion on this. I would really be strongly suggesting that you outsource your digital marketing when you start. There's a lot of companies out there doing really good quality digital marketing. And if you're not really well versed in doing it yourself, if it's not your expertise, this would be one of those things that you might want to crowdsource out there. And what we mean by crowdsourcing, obviously, there's many sites where people subscribe to get work, and you can just put the project out there. They will select the project, send you a quote, and often you can get this done for very reasonable costs. And they already have everything set up. They'll already be on Sales Navigator with LinkedIn, and they'll be engaged with Google, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, etc. So I would recommend on the digital marketing side that maybe we won't spend a lot of time on that right now, other than to say it's something you can outsource. It's something that's essential and something that we would call today more traditional.
I would agree with you 100%. The way that I would suggest using LinkedIn is in search of a particular name in a particular company to be able to enter that company with your product to meet the right person. That doesn't mean to say that, for example, you're going to contact the vice president of operations. He may be too high a guy to try and get to see, but you can ask him who he would suggest, who you could see with this novel product or technology that you have. And of course, the other thing, which you would use your digital marketing expert to help you with, is if you're dealing in the consumer side, to tell people about your product, have some content, have a story. And of course, something that is always worthwhile doing is a press release. Press releases do not cost much. They do not cost much. There are I wouldn't say lots, but there's quite a few press release companies that'll be happy to take your topic and you work what you want to talk about, and they will disperse it. The beautiful part about that is that you run a chance of getting a story in a newspaper. You do run a chance. The other thing that you could do, which has to do with media, is depending on how unique your product is or how unique you make your product, you could call up the newspaper. You could find out writers, open up the local newspaper, see who's writing which stories. Don't call the newspaper right off the bat. Get in touch with the actual writer himself, because that's the guy who's always looking for new slants, and he can potentially sell your story to the editor, who then, allocates the workload to him.
Absolutely, Joel. And, I think that leads us into this whole area of, content marketing, where you really do need to create high quality, informative, and engaging content relative to your industry or your niche. And it's really important that we briefly discuss the idea of making sure, obviously, that you have a really good website. And again, this is a perfect opportunity for crowdsourcing, Joel. I think it's there's so many people out there that are very creative, doing some incredibly great work when it comes to a website. One thing I want to talk about on the website, it's not so much the specifics of really drilling down, but at a very high level, it's really important you focus on your UX and your UI, which are your user experience and your user interface. And the user interface is really just a question of what each module looks like, what each screenshot looks like. Obviously, it has to be creative, it has to be graphically pleasing, et cetera, et cetera. And the user interface has to be, easy to use. So there's a bunch of, do's and don'ts when it comes to your user interface. But the one I really want to focus on is the user experience. And the user experience to me is by far the most important, and the most probably abused or lack of time spent maybe out there today. And I think it's the most important. The whole concept of when someone goes into your website and what it actually is from the outsider going in and what that experience is. And unfortunately, almost every business looks at their website from the inside out. They look at it as to what they think is the best thing, what they think is the best routes, what they think is the best experience. And the reality is that where the time needs to be focused is you need to have like almost a user group outside, even if it's friends and family to start with, to say, how easy was this to navigate? Giving you some prime examples, and I'll probably mention a couple of companies repeatedly because they do it really well, and it's one of the reasons that they're the largest companies in the world. But if you look at Tesla, when you go to order a car, you can like or hate the car, but their website, when you go to order a car, it's very simple. Do you want a SX? Do you want a Y or a 3? What color do you want it in? Do you want long range or standard range? Click here to order. And it's very simple, very easy. And you'd think you'd ordering pancakes for 99 cents instead of a car for $99,000. They make it very simple. It's the same thing with Apple. It's like, which phone do you want? The Pro? Do you want the regular? How much storage do you want? How much memory do you want? Click here and you've got your phone. The key thing is to get people as quickly through that experience process as possible. 1, 2, 3 clicks. That's all they want to know. Which phone? How much memory? Click here to order it. All of the once you've got that and you've got the money in, then the rest of it, you can ask them, what's your name, where do you live, everything else, but get that transaction done right at the front end and make it a beautiful, easy experience. And if the customer does have their information stored in your database, make sure obviously it gets all filled in so that once they do select that phone, they say, hey, here's all the information we have on you. Has anything changed it? If not, click the process button and we're out the door. So user experience to me is where every company fails, and it's one of the most important things you need to spend. In other words, make sure the people outside your company are giving you the feedback on what their experience was to order your product or service. That's way more important than you deciding what's the most important.
So Marty, that brings up another question, to be more specific on what you're saying. When you go to websites, quite often there will be a pop-up screen that says, for an additional 10%, please give us your email, or we will email you back a confirmation number, which of course is a way that they want to know who you are and how they can contact you, and of course build up their list. What do you think about that? Do you think that's good? I generally don't want to give my email right off the bat, so I press the X, and I guess I lose out on the 10%, but I don't personally like it. How do you feel about it?
I feel exactly the same way, Joel. I don't like it at all. What I like is the fewest number of clicks possible to get the information I want. When it gets down to providing your information, get me more engaged in there and give me that as an option towards the end. I'm great. But what I want right away is give me the information, let me get my order ready, and I'm ready to click process it. Then afterwards, if you want to ask the questions, would you like to be on our email list? I do like you. I tend to, just leave the sites very quickly when I have to qualify by providing an email address up front. I think it's one of the ways to really get rid of traffic really quick. If that's what your intention is to do, great. But I think in selling, it's the absolute opposite.
Okay, there's lots of other issues to consider. We talked about networking and partnerships. Are there any particular type of partnerships that come to mind that you've used in the past to do it on a low cost basis, your marketing plan?
Yeah, there's a bunch, Joel, and I probably will come to even more as we go through this module, but certainly at the front end is, again, finding any organization that already has your clientele as that they are currently marketing to and already have all the marketing information. So partnering with someone who's already targeting your audience is obviously one of the best ways. Another way is by attending industry events and conferences, local networking events, those kind of things, to not only get potential customers, but even more importantly, what I would call collaborators or influencers. You can, often what happens when you go to these events is you're going to run into the competition. And some people view competition as a threat, but I view it as an ally. And my entire career of my 38 years in one business was, I think I ended up getting more out of my competition than I did out of my customers. Because once you develop a good rapport and a good camaraderie with your competition, it's amazing what happens when all of a sudden they get into an area where they feel you do a better job, and all of a sudden they say, you know what, better we hand this off to these guys. You help each other. And interestingly enough, there's enough room for more than one person in an industry. And when the top three or four, you'll find the top 3 or 4 people often are much more cooperative than you think are they're more friend than foe. And another prime example of that, Joel, is, you look at Apple and Samsung and you think that they're fierce competitors. And yes, their lawyers are in lawsuits every day. But ironically enough, so much of the iPhone, at least up until now, has been comprised of Samsung parts. So they have to cooperate with each other in order to be successful. Not only that, they have to advocate together, because if they want to fight things like privacy or like as in the case of Apple and Samsung, they're being sort of forced into using the new C input as opposed to their proprietary inputs for charging, those type of things, or they're being told what they can do with their stores, as an example, with anti-competitive organizations that are telling them what to do. It really pays for them to actually cooperate quite heavily together, because they can also advocate together, and they can fight when the government come along and say, you cell companies or you phone companies or can't do this or you can do this. Well, they have to be friends because they have to advocate together. And I think it's really important from a marketing perspective. They do much the same. It's incredible. Yeah, you can always compete on your product and the way you offer it, stuff like that. But cooperation amongst competition is another way in which I've gained an immense amount of sales throughout my career.
But we have a lot of young people watching, and it kind of brings to light some of the things that I did, which was, because you're a young entrepreneur, and let's say you're going business to business, as an example. What you might want to think about, and it's quite easy today with LinkedIn, you can find, for example, if you're going to the banking markets, the financial sector, you can find a retired banker. And if you contact that retired banker, but you target him, he's an SVP, he's a big senior guy at a bank, you target him and you say, I'd like to chat with you about getting my technology into the bank. You can use him as a conduit. He'll be more than happy to help you. Potentially, he may want some type of compensation, a commission, or whatever. That's just fine. But he kind of brings a lot of credibility when you're going into the bank. He comes with you into the bank as a retired banker from that particular bank. And before you know it, you've become part of the buying process. You'll be able to sell them something, and he adds tremendous, tremendous credibility. So I believe you should consider using some successful people who have already done what you've done in some way in that market that you're focusing on.
Yeah, Joel, I completely agree. And in terms of credibility, one of the other things related to credibility is even on your website and in everything you do is to use testimonials. The fact of the matter is a great idea to get, to either find yourself a mentor who's senior, just even for mentorship, but at the same time, who also has connections and network, because they can get you into places very quickly that you could spend a lifetime. They spent a lifetime trying to get into the places. You may as well advantage that. And rather than wait a lifetime, you can use them to get into those places. And of course, any other testimonials, if you have some great testimonials, they should be on your website. They should be used throughout. And you should use those people to get you into the places that you need to go and to help you with the marketing of your product. And, I think this is leading us, Joel, into an area that I really enjoy and spend a lot of time in. Probably the last 15 years of my career, spent most of my time in understanding, the psychology of how people buy, and also how you would market to them. And I'm often think of the time where, even as a kid myself, I'd walk into a store and I'd see a pair of jeans for $20. And then I'd walk, into a mall, into a very, very high-end store, and I'd see what looked almost like the same pair of jeans, but they were $200. But the difference was they were in an expensive mall, an expensive store. And instead of just being called jeans, they were called things like highly distressed jeans. And what they really meant was they had rips in them. They called them distressed jeans, not torn, tattered jeans. Right. Back in our young days, our parents probably would have made us stay home and sew our jeans up. But in today, it's fashion, right? So this whole concept of why can somebody sell a pair of jeans for $20 and then just down the road sell them for $200, and yet they look very similar, probably last very similar. And this all leads me to this one key area, is that people do not buy rationally. So when we're marketing or branding to people, we got to remember everyone buys everything on an irrational basis. And our ability to predict that irrational behavior makes us successful in marketing and branding. So you've got to be very, very careful about the way in which you price things, the way in which, and just on that topic of pricing, there's a bunch of ways that you can price things. As an example, whenever you take a taxi or an Uber, do you prefer something that's metered or something that's packaged? So you could hop into a taxi or an Uber, and they could say, look, we're going to charge you whatever, $1 per mile or $1 per kilometer, depending on what part of the world you're from. Or would you prefer that somebody just comes to your door and says, look, we'll charge you $20 and take you right to the destination, and you don't have to worry about whether it's an extra kilometer or whether it's an extra mile. So a couple of ways of doing your pricing when you're looking at your marketing and your pricing is look at whether you prefer to do it metered or whether you prefer to do it packaged. Those are kind of things. So those are the some decisions you need to make. And the other thing you need to remember is this concept of what we call anchor pricing. Anchor pricing basically means that the only thing a person remembers when they walk in to buy something is really the first number. So there's reasons that people sell things at $9.99. It's because it's under $10. So it registers in your head as being under $10, and really the only thing you remember is $9. It's under $10. $10. So if you're setting your pricing, often setting a price at $10.25 is probably not a really good suggestion, because people view that as $10, and that gets into the category in your head of something being $10 to $20, as opposed to just discounting it an extra 26 cents and having it for $9.99.
And Marty, that applies to larger items, whether it's office equipment, whether it's automobiles. It's $9,999. The warranty is $999. It's funny. The psychology, which is what you've been talking about, never changes. People's psyche never, even though people say $9.99, you say to yourself, when you're going to price something, I know it's not really I know it's really $10, but the reality is you yourself have proven from your past experiences that selling it at under a fixed number, like a $10 number, a 0-digit number, is going to be more palatable to the market.
Yeah, and Joel, the other thing is, when you're talking about pricing, we have to talk about bundling and creating best value packages as well. You notice the huge move of the fast food industry, the movie theaters. When we were kids, we used to walk in and everything was priced individually. You pay so much for your popcorn, so much for your candy bar. And then all of a sudden they started putting these packages together, and it got to the point where they only offer packages. You can't even see on the board anymore individual packages. And the whole idea behind this is not only to package stuff, but simplify. Instead of having 80 items on a board that you walk in and having to make those complicated decisions and read through 80 different items, really what you come down to, and the most successful places usually have 9 packages. It's always under 10. So when you walk into McDonald's, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And it's gotten so good now that, as an example, if I said to anybody off the street, probably anywhere in the world, it said, if you walked into McDonald's and ordered a number 1 package, what would that be? And they would say, well, that's a Big Mac combo, right? Everybody in the world knows what it is, and it's a Big Mac, fries, and a drink, right? Now you can always adjust that bundle if you want. Say, I don't want the Coke or whatever, and the price might adjust, obviously automatically through the register. But this whole concept of bundling your product together, I have a cute little story that, when I was in Washington years back, I walked into a movie theater just to have some fun and try and figure out, some marketing strategies. So walked into a theater, not to attend a movie, but just to actually go to the kiosk and figure out what they were doing. So I looked at their number 1 package, and it included, I think it was something like a box of popcorn, a candy bar, and a drink. And in those days, it was something like, $9.99. So I then asked the person, I said, well, what if I just wanted the candy bar and the drink, or I just wanted the popcorn and the drink? Well, right away, it threw them into a fizzy. They couldn't, they didn't even know what to do, because it's not on the cash register, so they didn't know what to do. So I said, well, could you find out, because really all I want is the candy bar there. So they came back to me. As it turned out, and this was the most humorous part of it, as it turned out, buying the popcorn and the candy bar and the drink individually in this particular movie theater actually was less money than buying the package.
Amazing.
And I couldn't believe it. And I said, this doesn't make sense to me. How you have a package, your package would imply that things are cheaper. I don't get it. So the young person called the manager over and said, look, this person just pointed out to me that we key this in individually. It's actually less money to buy individually than this package. The manager was appalled and said, I don't know what the problem is. So they phoned head office. And this was all happening. And of course, I wasn't seeing a movie, so I had time. So this all happened. The manager phoned the head office and said, we don't understand, how can we be selling this package, which actually ends up, it's not a deal. It actually costs more. And the answer from head office was, we are selling a convenience package. And I just sat there and I roared and I said, oh, so there's actually a cost for convenience here. You're charging me more than it would to buy the 3 things. Now, I think there's an ethical issue here, but having said that, I think your bundles should always be less than the individual components, because I think there is an ethical issue. But it's just to tell you how programmed we are, that when we walk in, we automatically assume psychologically that if you're selling a package, it's got to be cheaper. But sometimes when you really check it out, it actually isn't. So that's one thing to know. So you want to sell things in packages. You don't want to offer more than 9 offerings on a board, always under 10 if you can. So that's another thing, is looking at best value packages.
Well, I think you're right. I think, and not to forget, the importance of the packaging is to simplify the process of purchasing by the consumer. Having said that, we would be remiss if we did not talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is guerrilla marketing. And, for those who aren't aware, guerrilla marketing, it's a marketing strategy. It focuses on, let's say, unconventional and also creative methods to promote a product, service, or a brand. It typically relies on low cost, impact tactics that aim to grab attention and, engage with the target audience in unexpected ways. I remember when I started one of my alarm companies, what did I do? I put up sandwich boards on a Saturday and Sunday. Where did I get the idea? I got the idea from the real estate market. The real estate sales guys, every Saturday and Sunday, they put out signage guiding people to an open house. That's a great idea. I got plywood, 2 feet by 4 feet, put up big signs with our logo on it, and whatever thing I wanted to interest people to call us with a phone number and a website. And bingo, every Saturday morning, I go out, put up these sandwich boards in my area, and sure enough, we would get business. So guerrilla marketing works. And I'm sure in whatever business or service product you're going to be marketing on, there is an opportunity for guerrilla marketing. In another situation, what we did with decals, we had these decals. Everybody knows if you go into a store that's protected by an alarm company, there's a decal. If you go into a home, there's a lawn sign and a decal. So what I did, I took our decals and I went to commercial buildings, because the front door of multi-business commercial buildings generally doesn't have one alarm company, because the individual tenants have their own alarm system. So I would slap on one of our decals on the front door to give the impression that we were securing this massive building. Lo and behold, we got calls. We got calls from tenants in the building. So all part of guerrilla marketing, doing things don't cost much, but can be very, very, very effective.
And Joel, talking about things that don't cost anything but can be very effective, that also blends very neatly with these bundling packages, because what you need to think of when you're creating these packages is, what are the things that you can add into these packages that really cost you nothing but are of great value to the end user. And I think these are great ideas. I also wanted to talk about the concept of what values a company. What values a company are these things. When people look at a valuation of a company, they look at the standard, EBITDA, and they'll give a value to it. But one of the key essentials today, when you're looking at your own valuation of your company, or someone's looking at valuing your company potentially as a purchase or as an exit, is this concept of how much stickiness is there. And stickiness is a big, big thing today. And how do you create stickiness? Well, if you look at one of the best examples I can think of is Apple One, where within the Apple brand, you can buy 5 or 6 different services all bundled together. So it's a great bundle because it involves not only keeping your information in the cloud. In addition to that, it's Apple Music, Apple Fitness, et cetera, et cetera. And they've bundled this all together, a nice little package at a reasonable cost. And what this does is, when someone's looking to acquire your company, the fact that you have a subscription is absolutely key and essential. So one thing I would tell everybody in creating their own business is, if possible, if your product or service lends itself, is you must create a subscription service. And subscriptions have an incredible value to somebody who's going to buy your business. And typically they're going to subscribe to something that's a bundle, and it creates this level of someone who's going to be with you for life. So if you're going to acquire a company, you sit there and say that their sales are $10 million, but it's all based on subscriptions. It has a lot more value than this, this non-recurring revenue where you're losing customers and getting customers all the time. So it's really great when you have a subscription. And honestly, even looking at something like a hair salon, people come in. Now, when you open a hair salon, people come in, they get their hair cut, they're happy for a year. Then they decide somebody opens down the road, they're $2 cheaper. They go in and get their hair cut there. And, it's very cyclical business. People come, they go. But could you imagine differentiating yourselves in a hair salon where you set up and says, for $99, you can buy a package of 10 haircuts, right? Or something along those lines. Or, I'll cut your hair as much as you want or as little as you want. And you set up a price point where it's $49 a month or $39 a month. You can come as often as you want. Similar to what they've done in the car wash business, right? So the car wash business, you used to go in, it was $10, whatever, to wash your car each time. Usually you'd only wash it 4 times or 5 times. Now what they do is they set up a process, they set up a subscription where for $29 to $39, you can wash your car as much as you want, up to a maximum of one times a day, but you can wash it 30 days in a row. They know that people are only going to come in 2 or 3 times on average, but basically what they're doing is they're getting you to pay a flat fee per month. You thinking in your head that you're getting 30 washes when you're probably only going to use 2 or 3, but you're subscribed for life. Now, if I was buying a car wash business and you told me we have lots of customers in the area and we do $1 million in sales a year, versus the guy who's a block away who says, oh yeah, we do the same $1 million a year, but all of these people are on a subscription, which business is going to be more valuable? So creating the stickiness. And another way of creating stickiness is by having people engaged in such a way where you own a part of their intellectual property. As an example, if you were doing some legal work for somebody and you agreed to set up and you had a really robust website for maintaining their legal files so that you could place all their stuff and it was easy retrieval. In other words, it's very difficult for them. You do all the work for them and then you send them all the documents, but they're having a lot of trouble figuring out where to keep stuff like that. And you say to them, look, one of the best things about our service is we will retain all of your products for you. We'll set up this module. You go to our website and it tells you exactly, this case number 1's here, case number 2's there, your bills are over here. We're gonna divide everything up in an easy retrieval system for you so that all of the information that you need will reside on our website, but it'll be completely secure for you. Very similar to what you do in what cloud-based stuff. If you have all your stuff in the Apple cloud or in the Microsoft cloud, it's going to take a lot for you to move from Microsoft to somebody else when all your information is stored with them. So the idea of storing information for people as another form of stickiness. So if you can do those 2 things, which Apple has done brilliantly, first of all, I'm storing all your information for you so you're not going anywhere. In addition to that, I'm bundling all your product for you into one nice little package for you. I've got a subscription. And we all know that, if I asked each person on the street today and I said, do you have any subscriptions that you haven't canceled? I would venture to say that probably 60 to 70% of the people I speak to said, yeah, I have a subscription that I'm currently paying for that I just haven't canceled because I keep forgetting to, right? So this is the whole idea of retaining information and doing a subscription, create incredible value for a company.
So really what you're saying is that in part of your offering, it may be worth doing something that's perceived by the client as free, but in essence, it's what I would call a silent handcuff.
Absolutely. And actually, I wanted to talk about free a little bit, which I'll get to momentarily. I think, another area we should touch on, Joel, is is this concept of, creating urgency as well, creating urgency using time. Often you go in to buy an airline ticket and it says only 3 left or only 2 left. And all of a sudden it forces you to say, look, there's a time limit here. So anything you can do to create urgency, usually you'll have what we call a call to action on any website or on any sale process. You have a call to action, which basically says, click here to go ahead and order the product. If you can add a sense of urgency, and again, it has to be legitimate, it has to be ethical, but if you can find in your product or service some way of creating that time, obviously
most importantly on something like that, when you say it's got to be ethical, it's got to be definitive, because right. If you say, well, if you don't buy from me this week, the price is going up next week, the consumer doesn't buy from you that time, what are you going to do? You put yourself in a corner, because if you don't give him the discount, he's very much disappointed and probably may not give you the order. And if you do give him the discount when you said it wasn't going to be available, you better damn well be able to justify why you can do it when you said you couldn't. Marty, one of the things got at, the other thing is that you go to one company and you say, oh, by the way, I want you to have exclusivity on this distribution of this product, but this other company, who of course is a competitor of yours, they're knocking at my door, but I'm trying not to see them. I really want to do business with you. So it's kind of making the customer feel special.
Absolutely, Joel. And in my old business, when towards the tail end of it, we were selling electronic advertising for our content. And we had a preset list already of very motivated consumers. And we would often phone consumer A and say to them, look, we've got, a banner ad available. We really, really want you to have it because you're special. But if we don't know within the next hour, company B is ready to sign this. They've already indicated, they've called us, they want, and we don't lie. We've spoken to them and they do say, yes, we're very interested. We would like to have it. So we'll phone company A back and say, look, guys, you have till 4 o'clock today. You've got to decide, do you want this banner ad? Yes or no? We need a credit card right away. And so we used to use that all the time in a proper and ethical way. But you would have to phone up company B and get their commitment first, know that they are at least interested in order to go back to company A. So that's a good sales tactic and a good marketing tactic. The other thing that's a good tactic is to sell out. Whatever it is, whatever product or service you have, it's sold out. That in itself creates this incredible desire, because I'm about to tell you something that is, I would call it one of the nuggets that we're going to deliver in this module. And always remember this. When it comes to marketing and when it comes to sales, everybody wants what they can't have. I'll repeat that. Everybody wants what they can't have. So when condominium corporations go out and put their condos up for sale, you'll see a sign, a huge sign across the top of it that says sold out. Okay. Well, how do you feel when you're driving by that condo and you see sold out? You feel, oh, I missed out on something. And of course, you want it way more than if it said, we have no buyers, please come in and buy from us, right? You don't want it because you don't think anybody else does. So having those condo signs up, or those big signs that say sold out in front of a condo, are an incredible way of getting people to come in and saying, is there anything left? Now, from an ethical perspective, what's happening is, what you don't see is the little writing above it says, phase 1 sold out, because there's always a phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4, and there's always the next building, right? So usually what it says is phase 1 sold out. And in fairness to the condo, phase 1 could be 5 units. It could be 6 units. So they sold their first 5 or 6 units, but it says phase 1 sold out. So of course, that brings people in to want to buy in phase 2, 3, and 4. Another thing that I've seen happen, and Joel, I don't know if you've ever witnessed this, but I used to work with a few restaurateurs, and what we were able to do with them, again, nothing unethical, but the way these particular restaurants opened up, whenever they opened in a new mall, is they always had a manager at the front of the store that made sure they kept the lineup outside. Okay. Now, I don't know if you've ever walked by a restaurant where you've seen people, 12 or 14 or 15 people lined up outside the restaurant. Then you go and look inside the restaurant, just nobody there. And you think, oh, well, my goodness, they probably don't have enough staff. Well, let me tell you now, they do have enough staff. Absolutely. And that's not the reason they've got 12 people lined up outside. They know that when you're walking by and you see 5 restaurants in a mall and one of them has a lineup, which one are you going to? And crazily enough, a lot of people will say, oh, I'm not going to any restaurant there where there's a lineup, but that's not the truth. The truth is that people want to eat where, again, everybody wants what they can't have. So when you see that lineup and you're looking to go have lunch, you're going to go into that lineup because you think that's the best store. The manager at the front is told, you keep at least 12 people in this lineup at all times, okay, until the restaurant's full. Once it's full and we actually have a lineup outside, then we'll leave things as is. So often people will use that as a tactic to just have a way in which of identifying that restaurant as being the most popular restaurant just by having a lineup outside, even though they don't have a lineup inside. So that's another tactic that's used if you're in that type of business. It's also used in places like clubs for, when we were young, when we used to go to clubs and things like that, often the club could be empty inside, but there's always a lineup outside, and that's the reason why. So it's a tactic.
So what you're saying, create a mystique with whatever you're selling that it's in high demand. You don't walk into a customer and say, I have to tell you, I haven't sold anybody today. I didn't sell anybody yesterday. Could you please help me and buy one of my products? You're dead in the water. But if you go in and you say, I am so busy, we have such demand for what we're selling, I myself can't believe it. Now, I do have a few left, not very many. Let me show them to you.
Joel, it reminds me of a great story of the best carpet salesman I ever met in my lifetime. And this guy would always walk in with 2 briefcases into every single showing he did. Right? Get a phone call. I'm interested in carpeting my house. I just bought a house. I'd like to carpet my house. I'd like to tile my house. The guy would walk in with 2 briefcases. He'd put one right in front of the customer and he'd open it up and he'd put the other one right by the side of that briefcase. And so he would begin to start selling them and say, well, we have these options for carpet, these options for tile, and he'd show samples of all the various things. And he'd keep kind of glancing over at the other briefcase. And eventually, the customer would say, but by the way, what's in that other briefcase? And he would always respond by saying, oh, well, I think that stuff is just far too expensive for you. I'm really suggesting you probably want to stay with this because the stuff in that one, it's really, really, it's not that much more, but it's really expensive stuff. That's a really good stuff. I didn't think would be interested in that. I don't think there's a person alive today that wouldn't say to that guy, you better open that briefcase. Let me just take a look at it, right? So,
and on principle, they want to buy from there. So you consider them as a type of person that would buy high-end product.
Absolutely. And you kind of know ahead of time who you're dealing with. So it's a great methodology.
Another one is when you're selling your product and they're going to want it tomorrow. You say, I got to tell you, as far as installations, we are booked up for the next 2 months. What do you mean you're booked up for the next 2 months? I need the product tomorrow. I don't know if I can do anything. Let me see. I'll call our manager. You call the manager. You know what? He's checking. He's going to see. You make the buyer push himself to push you to make the deal. Even though you could squeeze him in. You may be pretty busy, but you can always squeeze the guy in who's insistent. For me to buy from you, I need it tomorrow. So you have to be prepared for those type of opportunities.
Joel, one of the things I wanted to do, and I know you've already delivered a whole bunch of great, what I call nuggets. I wanted to try and at least give, one more from me. And if I wanted to leave the audience with one of, the one best nugget that I can deliver probably in this entire outline that we're doing on entrepreneurship, it's this. Whenever you sell something, always give 2 options, never more, never less. And the reason is that when you offer somebody 1 option, you have a 50-50 probability. If you ask somebody, do you want to buy this computer? They're either going to say yes or no. Your chances are 50-50. If you give them 100 computers to buy and say, we have 100 different computers here, just select the one you want, they'll be there for a year and never make a decision. But if you always give them 2 options at every point in the hierarchy, it's not just 2 options, it's 2 options at every point in the hierarchy, you will increase your chances up to about 67% of making the sale. And the reason is, when you ask them if you want to buy the gray computer or the black computer, you're not asking them if they want to buy a computer. You're only asking which color, right? And people tend to decide based on the question. So if the question is right, you'll get the right answer. I knew a great car salesman. He was the best of the best. And when you went in to buy a car, he would walk up to you and he'd never say, hello. He'd never say, the weather's nice outside. He'd never say, how you doing today? All the typical lines that a salesman would use. He would wait until you started looking at a car. And he'd walk over to you and he said, I have such a tough decision to make myself. And I know you're probably going through the same thing. I see you staring at this car and I'm just wondering, what color do you think is the best color for this car? Well, you're not asking a yes or no question. You're not saying hello to them. You're not asking about it. You're just asking, which color do you think is the best car? And the guy says, well, you know what? I really like this. It's here in red, but I really like it in black. Well, what have you already, just in that one moment, what have you identified? The guy's interested in the car. He wants it in black, right? And then you go on from there, right? Then the next question might be, you say, you know what? How important do you find 4-wheel drive? Do you prefer the 4-wheel drive or the 2-wheel drive? And all of a sudden he'll tell you, yeah, I would never have a car without 4-wheel drive. And then he'll tell you his life story about his experience with a 2-wheel drive and how he almost killed himself, right? And all of a sudden you're befriending him. But by asking the right questions and always asking for the answer, what you're giving is information not only to him but yourself, and eventually you're identifying exactly the car he wants to buy. You don't have to say much more before he says, hey, can I get a price? Can we do a deal? So it's a great methodology, always 2 options in everything you do. The other thing that, Joel, we were talking about at one time, just between you and I offline, was this concept of free giveaways. The concept of try it before you buy it, right? You can't be greedy in life, okay? I think, we were both raised much the same way. We have the same ideology is, worry about the giving, the taking will look after itself. If you give stuff away and you're kind to people and you're not greedy, it's amazing how much it will come back. So do the giving, the taking will look after itself. And you've got to go out there and give things. Joel, you did your free alarms. We often provided free services of all kinds to a host of different people just to get them engaged in the product. If your thought process is, and you're the level of thinker that says, I'm not giving anything away for free, I think you're going to have a problem as an entrepreneur. I think you have to.
It says that you yourself do not believe in your product. Correct. Because it's very simple. If you believe in your product, I'm willing to let you try it for a period of time. Yeah. You evaluate it, but I want to make sure before I allow you the opportunity to try our product or service that I believe you are a strong potential buyer. And I'm going to tell you, in maybe 10, 15, 20% of the time, that product or service is going to come back. And when it comes back, you take it back cheerfully, because if you take it back cheerfully, you will see in a couple of months later, that customer who tried the product calls up and says, now I want it. And you say, not a free trial, but a purchase. And he will agree to that.
So absolutely. And Joel, one of the great examples of that, it's just a fun example, and that everyone will understand, is if you ever walk through a food court and you know, there's 12 people there, but there's always one or two of the kiosks where they have their people not behind the counter, but they come out. They actually don't just sit there and be order takers. They're order makers. They're not order takers, they're order makers. They'll actually come out from behind their booth and stand in front of their booth and be handing out free samples of their chicken or their ice cream. Right?
I love the free samples.
And who doesn't love a free sample? And you know what? Generally, you go over there thinking, you know what? I'm not going to buy. I'm just going to take the free sample. But what happens more often than not is you take that free sample and two things happen to you. Firstly, you say, wow, this is really, really good. You know what? Maybe I'll buy it. And the other sense that seeps into you a little bit is a little sense of guilt that, you know, you just took something for free. Maybe you should buy something, right? So
Costco, Marty, you can't leave out Costco. Costco does it all the time.
Look, Costco's made a living on this. I mean, you walk into Costco, you can have lunch and dinner. You know, it's incredible what they do. In fact, I noticed for the first time that Publix in the United States is starting to do the same thing. They're starting to mirror image Costco. You walk in there, there's usually now they have a whole series of a kiosk in front where they have a whole series where you can try different products, try and buy different products. So this whole idea, if you're wondering if it works, just walk into a food court and look at the kiosk that is the busiest, by far the busiest. It's the one handing out free food. So Joel, I know we're winding down here. I did want to share a couple of stories and a couple of other pieces of advice that I think we want to give to our listeners. One of them is this concept of also what the automobile industry did years and years ago, and even the department stores years and years ago. And I don't want you to lose this concept. Often when you're opening a store, retail store, or a service, you will say to yourself, I don't want to be near the competition. Because, you know, they're down at that street. I'm going to open, you know, 10 blocks away, so I'm not close to the competition. Well, it's again a huge psychological mistake. What you want to do is open right beside your competition. And the reason you want to open beside your competition is to allow the consumers to have a choice. But here's the thing, and here's the concept that you need to understand. Getting 50 cents or getting 50% of $200 is a lot better than getting 100% of $10. So when you're out there as a single entrepreneur, people are coming to you. That's great. It's a wonderful thing to be happening. But here's the thing. If you can build, and that's the birth of the automobile mall, right? All of the automobile dealers came together, the Fords, the Chryslers, the Saabs, the GMs, the Lexuses, they all came together to form a mall. Why did they do it? Why would competition open beside competition? Because what they want to say to people is, look, come here, we have ample parking, okay? We'll let you pick whichever car you want, but pick a car from our mall. So what happened was all these individual guys that were sitting out there that didn't want to be beside competition all ended up closing their doors, because no matter how much they were getting, it didn't compare to the fraction of the sales that they got from the mall. So if you're opening a product or service, open right beside your competition. They've already got the buyers coming there. All you want is you want a piece of the pie.
It's kind of like taking it and looking at other marketing efforts that have proven to work. Having said that, it all comes down to the same thing we've said before. Whatever you do, you gotta be consistent, you gotta be persistent, and marketing is an ongoing process. So continually evaluate, refine your strategies based on feedback, and of course, as we all know, data.
Joel, I want to share one more story, and that has to do with years ago, this concept of again, a little bit of greed and a little bit of not understanding the psychology of how people buy. Years back, there was a hockey team in the United States known as the Chicago Blackhawks, and it was owned by a gentleman by the name of Mr. Wirtz Sr. Mr. Wirtz Sr. Found that after having a fairly successful team for many years, that the quality of the team began to diminish, and they were dropping in the standings. And more importantly to him, the viewership and the number of people that were actually coming to the stadium was starting to dwindle. They used to have, 20,000 people in the stands, and the team got a little worse. They got 16,000 people. And then it got a little worse. They got 14,000 people. Well, at that particular time, Mr. Wirtz was showing all of his home and away games, the Chicago Blackhawks. So when they got down to 12,000 people in the stands, Mr. Wirtz Sr. decided, rather than a proper sales strategy, he decided to punish people because they weren't coming to the stadium. So he said, you know what, we're not going to show our home games anymore for free, because if you're not going to fill the stadium, I'm not showing it for free. So he took it off the air and they began only showing certain home games. And of course, the attendance went down to 10,000 people. And he said, well, the attendance is still dropping. I'm going to take more home games off TV. And he kept doing more home games and more home games off the TV. And instead of this punishment working and attendance going up, it worked just the opposite, to where he's literally having 3,000 and 4,000 people showing up for the game. Well, both the sad, happy story to this is, years back, Mr. Wirtz Sr. unfortunately passed away. And his son, Wirtz Jr., took over the team. And it made headline news all across Chicago.
Did he give away free tickets? Did he give away free tickets?
He didn't give away free tickets, and he punished people by taking all the home games away. So what Wirtz, sorry, you're talking about Wirtz Jr. So what Wirtz Jr. did, okay, was a combination of two things. But the biggest part of the headline was, he did the equivalent of giving away free tickets by doing this. What he did was he announced that every single Chicago Blackhawk home game from that point forward was going to be broadcast on TV for free. Obviously for free, they get their advertising dollars, but they would be broadcast. So it's the same thing as giving something away for free. He went and instead he lifted the blackout from the games, and he made it so that everybody in the stadium, or everybody at home, would be able to see the free games. So big headlines, Wirtz Jr. takes over team and eliminates the blackout on home games and starts to show all home games. So you would figure, based on Wirtz Sr., that the minute they start showing their home games, that attendance would drop down even further, because if people could watch it at home, why would they come to the game? Well, the exact opposite happened. As he began showing the home games, the stadium began to fill back up again. And another interesting thing happened. Believe it or not, the team, same players, same skates, same helmets, they began to play better. Why? Another concept. No Olympic record was ever broken in an empty stadium, right? And with all of the people starting to come to the games, the team got more motivated and started to play better. And one thing led to the other. The stadium filled up. The subscribers at the home got bigger. And guess what happened 2 years later? This last place Chicago Blackhawk team won the Stanley Cup 2 years later. All because that they started showing their home games. They started, giving things away. People filled the stadiums. Why did people still live the stadiums? Well, if you're in the event business and you think by not broadcasting your event for free is a good thing, you're wrong. Broadcast it for free, because what people realize is by broadcasting things for free, they realize what the event's value is, which is networking. If you think, Joel, of the Super Bowl, what's the most expensive ticket you could probably buy for an event? What's the most expensive ticket? Probably the Super Bowl. You'd spend thousands of dollars for the Super Bowl. Not only thousands of dollars to buy the ticket, but you'd have to fly to it. You'd have to rent a hotel room. You'd have to rent a car. Then you'd end up at the game. You'd be sitting at the game, probably behind a guy that you can't even see over. The other guy's had so much to drink, he's throwing up on you. The person beside you on their cell phone talking to their wife. There's no instant replay. It might be in an open stadium where you're freezing cold. You're spending all this money. Why? Because of that networking opportunity. Even though you could have stayed at home, you could have made your own food for the most reasonable cost that you could think of. You could have watched it on TV. You could have had analysis paralysis. You could have had all the instant replay over and over again. You could have invited friends over. Why do you go to the stadium instead of staying at home? It's this whole concept of that the NFL has been very smart to do a few things. Number one, they brand their day. Everybody knows, if I asked anybody in the world, when does the NFL play? They would say Sunday. They would say 1 o'clock and they would say 4 o'clock. They know the time, they know the date. No one has to look in their phone. No one has to look on their computer. Everyone knows here It's branded here. Sunday, 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Yes, they've trickled into Monday Night Football and Thursday Night Football, which I think is not necessarily the best strategy. But having said that, they have branded Sunday 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock so well, and they show every single game is on TV. Everybody knows every player, right? Now, here's a league that only has 16, I think now 17 games a year. They don't have to they get the same amount of money as the teams that are playing 162 or 82 games a year, right? They get in 16 or 17 games. Why? Because they've done such a great job branding, and everybody wants to be at these games, even though they know they can stay home. So remember, giving things away for free, which means just like giving them on your TV, like as you know, giving all the home games, is by far the best possible thing that you can do in order to attract the viewership and in order to attract customers. Last couple of things I want to touch on, Joel, and I think I'm done, is the concept of also when you're selling your product, look to geographic expansion as well. I think you did this when you were started up, I think in Canada, you expanded to the States. If you're doing something really well at home, probably try it at home first. But if you're doing something really at home well first, think about taking it on the road. Think about other markets that you go to geographically. The other thing that you should probably consider are things like doing newsletters and podcasts. But again, if you're doing them, always do them the same day, the same time. So everybody knows Friday at noon, Joel's podcast or Joel's email is coming. And they get very used to the fact that at noontime, that next email is coming. If I asked you the question, when's Apple's unveiling of the next iPhone? Everybody knows it's in September. Everybody knows the next phone's coming in September. And of course, they started that way and they stuck with it. Another thing you've already alluded to, Joel, is this concept of going viral. You already mentioned it. Think of some shocking headlines or some crazy stunt. Just something you can do that's completely off the wall. That's just, whether it's the sandwich boards or something else. And again, I think you alluded to it as guerrilla marketing. And I would call it guerrilla marketing, as well as under that caveat, as well as the idea of going viral. If you can go viral with a product or service, you can't pay for that kind of stuff. Make sure you're in touch with your community, attend the events, make sure that you offer referrals. That's another thing I don't think we touched on yet. This concept of always have a referral, right? I think you wanted to say something about referrals.
No, I think you're right. I think, and with referrals, you do not necessarily have to pay for referrals.
Right. That's the best part of it, is like, if you don't have to pay for them. And in fact, maybe there's other ways of rewarding people that are already your customers. But referrals are very, very important. You should look at things like search engine optimization, online directories, be in those as well. Make sure that you measure your results. And like we've talked about a lot of stuff here, and I know that Joel's going to conclude this in a moment, but whatever you do, also make sure you've got a yardstick somewhere where you can measure the results of all of these activities, seeing what works for you, whether it's the guerrilla tactics, whether it's giving away things for free, whether it's opening beside your competition, whether it's this idea of using this double choice of things in a hierarchy of always offering two choices. What you really need to do is come up with this overall strategy based on the module that we've given you, try them all out, see what works for you, come up with a yardstick to measure them, and then take the best of what works for you, go forward and multiply.
And the person who's going to help you design adjusting your plan is going to be your customer. He's going to say to you, well, if you could do it this way, and you keep pushing your way, when you walk out of that customer's office, you say to yourself, hang on a second, I think I missed something. Just a second. He was saying, if we could do it this way, if we could make the trial period for another week longer, he'd be interested. And I keep saying only 1 week. Be adaptable, because you'll find that by adapting, you will make your plan more successful. That's the key.
Joel, I think it's a great way to end by saying you can't learn anything while you're talking. You need to listen, and you need to listen to your customers. We're doing this module, we're doing all the talking because we're doing all the teaching right now. But if we were in learn process, you cannot learn by talking. You need to listen to your customers, and react to your customers. Understand, like we talked about earlier, what is that customer experience, not just on your website. What is that customer experience? And you really, really have to stay in tune with your customers from the outside in and not operate your business from the inside out.
And on that note, we are going to conclude Module 4 on marketing. We'll see you at Module 5.